Welcome to Business Prowess with Rafael and Dr. Andrea. Our show will bring you the best insights, ideas, and inspiration from successful entrepreneurs and CEOs in the business world. Don't miss out on the opportunity to learn from the best and stay ahead of the game. Sifu Rafael is the founder of 5 unique shows. He's a fitness professional, solutions expert, executive coach, and head instructor at Max Martial Arts and Fitness in New York. Dr. Andrea Adams Miller is an award-winning international keynote speaker, best-selling author, and CEO of the Red Carpet Connection Publicity, Publishing, and Talent Agency, and CEO of IgniteYourRelationship.com. Known as the Dream Maker, she makes visionaries' dreams come true, bigger than they ever dared to desire.
Dr. Andrea, how are you on this beautiful Friday?
Well, I'm hunky-dory. I'm at a mutual friends event here in Chicago, and they're doing breakthroughs this morning. So it's really doing well. Spencer and Katie Jones. So super lovely event. So nice to see what our peers are up to and what they're doing and how they're shining in the world.
Love it, love it. And thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us. But I'm super excited. Not only is it Friday, but we have 2 incredible guests with us. Let's go ahead and bring them on. We have Aurora and Jodi. Ladies,
Hello.
welcome.
Thanks
Oh,
for
it's
having
wonderful
us.
to be here with the 2 of you.
Well, thank you. We're so glad to have you. We already were having some fun before we even got started with you guys. So all of you listening, you're so in a treat today because we've got 2 people who are bombastically amazing. So there you go.
Well, Andrea, before we started recording, you were just talking about neuroscience, and I love talking about the neuroscience of communication. And my goal is that people who listen to this podcast today, which will definitely be worth your time, get some tips on how to turn their words into wealth.
Nice.
Love it.
Well, and speaking about turning words into wealth, wow, Jodi, well, that's exactly what you do.
I guess so, yeah. Also, I have a podcast that talks about the power of sound, and I love talking to people about the neuroscience of that. So if either of you are interested, let me know. But yeah, I love voiceover and everything that's involved in it, and using my voice and the power that gives to us. So Aurora, I totally get where you're coming from. Yeah, there is a lot of power in sound.
Absolutely. You have to combine the sound with the message, with the presence. Yes. Andrea is our presence expert here.
She sure is. I got to tell you, Turn Words into Wealth is true. It's an amazing book, but those words couldn't be any truer. I mean, Jodi, you make money because of the words you use and the way you communicate. So today we're talking about mastering communication and the influence that it has, not only on your life, but the people around us, the communities that we serve, and even the impact that we make in the world. So I love this conversation. We're going to get into deep. Let's get into it. Let's go.
Awesome. Well, I think one of the key things I love to start off with is that so often the message sent is not the message that is received. So we think about, our business or what we want to communicate. We get down in the weeds. We're on step 14 because we're so familiar with what we do, but we forget that the person that we're speaking to is at step 1, and we need to guide them from step 1 to 14. But probably we need to just keep it simple. And what are 3 steps? In a second, Jodi will talk about the voice that you use to communicate. But so often, really smart, intelligent, well-educated people do not understand that the message that they send is not the message that is received. And in fact, there's 3 steps to effective communication with neuroscience. First, you have to hook attention. Then you need to connect with the midbrain, which is like, who else knows about this? Who else thinks this person or this topic is worth talking about? So for example, with this fantasy book that just came out, it's got a Reader's Choice Award that is addressing the midbrain. And then the third part is to deliver your message, but to do so in a conversational way so that you're not speaking for an hour and then saying, what do you think about that? But speaking for a couple of minutes and then checking in because, perhaps they're interested in a completely different topic that you may also be interested in. So those are the 3 quick steps. Connect with the croc brain, that hook of attention. So a title of a book, Turn Words into Wealth, is an example. Turn Words into Wealth won Outstanding Nonfiction Book of the Year. That's the midbrain. Being on this podcast is midbrain. It's communicating, all these people think I'm worth talking to and vice versa. And then third, deliver your message. So those are the 3 steps to doing it. And now maybe Jodi can tell us about the voice you need to communicate with, because of course, there's a lot more than just your words. It's how you're speaking, how you're holding yourself, and the timbre of your voice as well.
Oh, yeah. It all depends on who you're talking to. So you really do need to know who you're talking to. Are you talking to a 7-year-old? Are you talking to your mom? Are you talking to your best friend? You're going to talk to those people in different ways. So what you were saying, Aurora, about the way that what you're saying, maybe not conveying what you mean, then you definitely want to make sure that your tone of voice is what you mean, because people are going to take your tone of voice. Like if someone asks how you were that day and you say, I was okay. Or if you say, oh, I was okay, that's very different.
Very.
Yeah, that's about all I'd say to that, honestly.
Yeah.
That's such a fun exercise to do with people, especially when we're reframing how we want them to deliver a message or how we want them to think about themselves or the language that they say. I like, just even this morning, somebody was saying, that's really hard. And I was like, oh, so that was really hard. And I made it real fun and quirky. And they were like, I was saying it was like really hard. And so it's funny that you mentioned this, Jodi, because we just had this conversation and I said, I said, really, was it hard or was it just hard? And she was like, I guess it's kind of hard. And then it went from really hard to kind of hard to, a little hard, like a little.
But it's one word. It's one word. And the way that you say it is what they get out of the meaning. Right. That's so, yeah, the way that we say things really has a lot of bearing on how people take our meaning.
You did a little cognitive behavioral therapy there, Andrea. Help that person shift a bit. That was wonderful.
Yeah.
I also really go ahead.
To be a meta monster was what we call it. Like, so people will say things like, usually when somebody says that was hard, and I'll say, oh, when did you decide that?
Right.
With peers and loved ones who know that I'm going to challenge them on what they say so that they'll stop putting themselves in that mindset, So please, Aurora, continue.
Well, I also think the reason that the message sent is not the message received is because most people know how to talk. So they just assume they can just open their mouth and the message will, automatically come out. But that's not the case, or at least if you want to communicate effectively, it's really worth practicing and honing and coming up with what I call your $1 million message, and coming up with stories or statistics that illustrate your $1 million message. So I'm going to give you an example right now. So there is a book called Significant Objects, which studied the impact of a message on the value that an item would sell for. So they put 100 distinct objects on eBay with a message or without a message. The message added significance, but it wasn't adding necessarily hype. It was like, my grandmother owned these pot mitts. I used to remember she'd bake chocolate chip cookies, and the scent of the cookies when I came home from school was delightful, and she used these pot mitts. The person buying those pot mitts is not getting the cookies. But the result of this experiment, and the messages were written by 100 different people. Some of them were experts, and some of them were newbies, and some of them were even kind of a little disturbing messages, but they added significance. And so what do you think was the difference in value of the sale with the message without, with the significant story?
Emotional connection.
So let's all guess. So emotional connection. Sifu, what do you think?
It brought a lot of value because people just thinking about the cookies. Meanwhile, it's not the cookies they were selling. So definitely.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And for me, I love that, because all of a sudden now you either smell cookies or think of cookies, and again, that's all the emotional or relational or physical stuff of where have you been, where that meant something, where your grandmother's whatever, or somebody that was like your grandmother, or a neighbor who was like that. All of a sudden they have their own story in their head that replaces the story that they're reading, is my assumption. So.
Exactly. Anybody want to take a guess how much more the exact same item with the story sold for?
30%.
I'm going to guess 70.
70%, 30%, 70%. Sifu's read my book, so he might already know.
I'm guessing perceived value has a lot to do with that too,
Mhm.
because obviously the
Yeah.
seller valued it, so other people would.
It actually adds value neuroscience wise. It changes the feeling the person would have about the pot mint. Sifu, you want to guess how much more money was made?
I'm going to go 70%.
2,700%.
Whoa.
Wow.
7 times.
That's amazing.
So anytime you can add significance and add a story, add an emotion to what you're selling, even if you're not exactly selling that thing, but it's genuine and authentic, you may be adding, or you could add as much as 27 times more revenue. So it's really worth your time to study communication, to prepare your sound bites, to think about it, and to add value instead of just saying, here, buy pot mints. No, tell a story.
That's a great
Now that makes me
example.
want to do an experiment. I want to take something zero value, except for like, to me, that like, or like something that I don't want anymore. Actually, we've been doing that. I've been every day. In fact, I had my girlfriend come into my house the other day because she hasn't been in my house to see how much stuff I've gotten rid of. And as we were walking through, I literally was going, she's like, what are you doing? And I'm like, I don't want any of this stuff anymore. But so to take something that maybe used to mean something,
Yeah.
and to sell it, which like is probably worth like $1, and then tell a story, tell 2 different stories about it and see what happens.
Yeah. Well, tell me if you do that experiment. I would love to know the result.
I think that would be a lot of fun. I think I shall.
And if anybody wants the data, it's written up in the book called Significant Objects.
That's a great book. When you consider putting a story behind anything, people like stories. It helps them connect. And when we can connect an object, this coffee cup, it says Texas, and it was given to me in New York City, but it was given to me by somebody who I looked up to. And I never expected him to even see me. And when he brought me a gift, he went to Texas, and he was my boss, and he brought it back to me. And I was like, wow, you thought of me.
And you probably think of that every time you use that cup. You have a little warm glow.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But if I was going to tell somebody or sell this to somebody, that story can say this has so much value to me, even though it's probably only worth $7.
Right.
But I can't part with it less than 15.
Yeah.
Would you be willing to take it for 15?
Yeah. And curiously, as you tell the story, it changes the wiring in the listener's brain. Like they've done experiments with telling stories about wine and then having a wine tasting where it's, you can't see the label. But if people think it's a $500 bottle of wine versus a $100 bottle versus a $5 bottle, it actually changes the way your taste buds respond.
They've done this with coffee too.
Yeah. So adding a story actually changes the value. It adds value. It adds true value to the brain of the person who's received your story.
So I can add to this specific. So I went on a fabulous wine fantasy tour years ago, and I don't even drink wine or like wine, but I wanted to go where we were going, and with the people that we were going with. And I would taste the wines where we went, and I would spit them out because I don't like wine.
Yeah.
However, they opened a $30,000 bottle of wine and told the story about why it was a $30,000 bottle of wine. And that glass I swallowed because it was a $1,000 glass.
Don't want to waste that.
wasn't that bad.
Changed your actual experience. That's funny.
It's interesting because I was walking with Dr. Andrea. We're at an event and we're walking. We all got out of the Uber and we're walking. Actually, I think we were walking to the event. And she looks down, she goes, money. And she found money. And everybody just stopped. And it was only like $2 or so. But it's the fact that she, even though she was conversing with all of us, her eyes still were paying attention to where her feet were going. So a lot of times we don't necessarily pay attention to those things in front of us. We can have something in our home that has so much value if we only added a story to it.
Yeah,
now,
exactly.
Dr. Andrea, I'm sure that that's one of the many times you have found money, because you said, I find money all the time.
I do. Money finds me is what I say. My mom is also one of those people. My mom finds money all the time. And so she buys trees with the found money to honor her friends who have passed on and so forth. So she found a way to do something with the money that's important to her. And so it's fabulous. And I love this because, the more now that people are doing more reels and memes and TikToks and, different things, the way that they are using their messaging and their words, and whether they're going more viral because it's a story or because they're creating controversy, or maybe the vocal inflection of how they're telling that story, Jodi, really, I think does make a difference, and it allows us more creativity than we ever realized that we had before.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I really encourage everybody to craft at least $1 million message. The name of this podcast, Business Prowess, is actually $1 million message. Good for you, Sifu and Andrea. Or Andrea's website, The Red Carpet Connection, like boom, that you really get that right away. So in my book, Turn Words into Wealth, I give a bunch of different examples. Some of them are book titles like The 4-Hour Work Week, Tim Ferriss, or Brene Brown, Power and Vulnerability. There's a tension between those two words. Or Purple Cow, Seth Godin's book. There's definitely a tension. What? A purple cow. Yeah. But it can also be used, like I'm sure we all recall Steve Jobs saying that there was 1,000 songs in your pocket, or Bill Gates saying to put a computer on every desk in every home. So I think everyone should think about what are some short, snappy phrases that convey the value of what you stand for or your business stands for. Because these can just roll off your tongue, power and vulnerability for our work week, business prowess, etc. And it's really worthwhile taking the time, as we just went over. Perhaps you're leaving 27-fold income on the table. But even if it's only 2x, take the time. Steve Jobs practiced for 3 weeks before Apple launches. And I'm sure none of us were as busy as he was at that time as CEO of Apple. So I really encourage the listeners to study neuroscience, study communication, and practice. It will honestly be worth every second you spend doing it.
Aurora, I love the fact that you're talking about this, because you just talked about Apple, and they had a big launch video just the other day, and the way they communicated, their body language was almost none except for their hands and their face. So they definitely were portraying a message of clean. It was so well done, and I'm sure they didn't just do it fly by night. And there was a lot of practice, a lot of going back and forth. But when we are going to create that $1 million message, is because we don't want to just sell 1 million. Apple doesn't want to sell one iPhone or one iWatch, right? They want to sell millions of it. Take a look at this, everybody. Take a look. Let me know what you think after.
In a world where words shape destinies and connections forge futures, this November 22nd to the 24th, Speaking Prowess brings you the ultimate hands-on workshop. We have a lineup of some of the most influential communication experts in the industry. These are the voices that will guide you on a journey to enhance your ability to connect, influence, and succeed. Sifu Rafael, master instructor and founder of Speaking Prowess, blends communication and leadership to help you reach your full potential. Richard Walsh brings his strategic and tactical expertise to deliver rapid, lasting results for your business. Dr. Oliver T. Reed, the international multi-best-selling author and motivational speaker, known as the Writing Coach, will help you craft your messages with precision. Jose Escobar, a nationally recognized speaker and leader, will guide you in mastering personal development and leadership skills. This is more than just an event. It's a game-changing, skill-building experience. Walk away with communication prowess that transforms your personal and professional life. Speaking Prowess, where communication becomes your superpower. Reserve your seat now.
Ta-da!
Well done.
Great.
When we consider everything that we're talking about, and we have a lot of people making comments, and I'm loving all the comments everybody's making. When you consider everything that we can do with our voice, that we can do with our body, the way we communicate with another human being, but the most important message is the one that we have with ourselves. I think that is where we need to start sometimes, because, Aurora, you talk about create that $1 million message. And you also talk about it in your book, and I agree 1,000% that message is played twice before. It's in your head, and then when you actually say it, right? Or you write it down. So I think those are the important aspects. And sometimes don't just blurt something out without thinking about it first.
Well, unless you're a professional like Jodi, it's really important that you believe your message, because most of us cannot control our voice enough to communicate authenticity, passion, conviction, unless we really feel that it's true and that we care about it and it's what we stand for. Maybe Jodi, can have the mastery of her voice to communicate that when maybe that's not all in integrity.
That's where the acting comes in voice acting. But I mean, that's not something that's inherent only in voice actors. Any person can believe what they say. It's all about being in the right mindset.
Yeah. So like you're saying, Sifu, your message first is to yourself. And so to create the right mindset, Andrea was talking about mindset earlier. It's so important that we seek to be channels for the truth, seek to be of service, seek to make a difference for others. Like, when I'm coaching my clients, I help people create, publish, and promote books. So the promote stage gets to them being on podcasts or speaking on stages. And so often people shut down, like, who am I to give this message? And then their voice goes, and then their body language goes, and then they forget their words. And I'm like, forget about yourself. What message would you really love to give the audience? How can you communicate something of value for the audience? And when people shift to focusing on the audience, I'm sure Andrea knows about this with her red carpet connection material. If shift to being of service, to being a contribution, their energy shifts, their passion shifts, their voice shifts, and they remember their message, and people respond completely differently than when you show up like, who am I?
It's interesting when we talk about stories, because people remember stories. They may not remember the details. If you just came across and you gave a bunch of details, people are going to go, oh my God, I can't remember all this. But if you tell them a story and then later on you ask them about some of the details, all of a sudden, wow, I got it. So I love it.
How we can verify this with the listeners, just for funsies, I invite people to make a list right now at home. What are the 10 commandments? And it's actually surprising how few of the 10 commandments most people remember. But then think, how many stories from the Bible can you remember? So like we can do like an instant little test there. And most people remember far more stories if they've ever gone to church or ever, checked out the Bible. Or, if you have a different faith, choose a different text. That list of 10, most people don't remember. So when we are super educated, people tend to give data, but people don't remember data as well as they remember stories. Exactly what you're saying, Sifu.
Mhm. Yeah.
And people remember how you make them feel. So the little story about the pot mitts made the person feel good, feel connection to cookies, feel connection perhaps to their own grandmother, and that people buy with feeling, not with fact.
That's why I talk about the power of sound, because sound is what reaches our emotions really quickly. So you
Mhm.
can make a really beautiful video, but if the sound sucks, you're not going to get the reach that you were hoping for.
Yeah.
Without a doubt.
I'd like to tell you guys a story about sound. So I worked in law enforcement. I was police certified, but I was a police dispatcher. And while working there was one other female that worked as well in dispatch. And they always had us on different shifts. So I never really ever heard her very often. But there was one time where it just so happened that we both were on. And how she would answer the 911 calls would make me laugh. And this is how I 911, what's your emergency? So I wanted to be direct, firm, open, I'm clear, I'm going to make something happen. And
Right.
she answered the phone. 911, what's your emergency? I would laugh and go, oh my gosh, I feel like somebody's calling some sex hotline.
Oh my gosh, that's
I'm
completely different.
working with her because it's like, stop.
Wow.
That's very funny.
Results. Did you have any information?
Well, I mean, just imagine if you were calling because your dad is dying or your baby's choking, you'd think, what did I just call the 1-800 number?
Got the right number.
Is this 911?
So the power of Jodi can be so strong with
Yeah.
what you're doing. And Jodi, will you give us some little examples of some things that you've done for some clients to help them shift and their brand messaging and sound, or what you've done with your own voice if they've hired you to do your own sound rather than helping train them maybe to do something?
Well, mostly what I'm hired for is to continue the brand voice of the brand that I'm speaking for. So, what I'm kind of doing when I do, let's say, a corporate narration for someone like Dell or Bose or, whoever else, they're asking me to continue with the sound that they already have. Usually, they've decided my sound fits their brand. And so what I'm doing is I'm really speaking their words in a way that will get that across to whoever is listening, in a way that shows that they are humble but proud, I guess. That's usually what it ends up sounding like. In the case of healthcare, if I'm doing healthcare work, a lot of it has to do with hope. So it's really about the underlying emotion that they're trying to get across and the words that they've told me to speak. Because I don't write the scripts myself, they write them for me. And then it's how I connect to those words and relate it in a way that they want me to relate it, that matches the message they're trying to put out and the brand of their company.
So what I'm hearing is, how we've got this show pulled together is, Sifu talks about all communication, whether it's in your physicality and how you stand and how you dress and your lighting and how you present. Aurora comes up with the words. I'm talking about who is it that you're talking to, and then Jodi is like so if we were a wedding cake, Sifu is. He's like the kind of flour and the salt and what are we putting in there? What kind of vanilla are we using? Aurora, makes the frosting just so that it has that rich buttercream and wonderful in it. I'm taking the pictures of all the doodads and fun, but Jodi is like the doodads that go on the cake that give it that little
I'm the
sparkle.
decoration.
Yeah. Really, it's true because we can have all these beautiful scripts, but if the scripts don't have the tone and the inflection and the pacing and it just can be lost.
And you have to be in the right mindset for that. I mean, generally when I'm speaking, it depends. There's different tones for different types of scripts. And, there's a corporate read. There's a corporate way that you present yourself. You want to have a little bit of gravitas maybe, but it's still connecting with the audience, but it's professional, in a commercial, a lot of times they're asking me to just be talking to my girlfriend across the way we're having a coffee together. So they want it really personal and intimate. I do a lot of ads and streaming things for things like iHeart and SiriusXM. And a lot of that is very intimate, in your ear stuff because it's one-on-one. It's one person listening to that ad in their earbuds while they're walking, right? So it's a very different type. There's different types of reads for different industries and different media. And if you're hiring a voice actor, you're hiring them for that knowledge and to be able to deliver in whatever voice fits your message.
I love that. I love it also when you said that you don't write the scripts, but you need to connect with the words.
Yes.
And a lot of times we don't. We don't even connect with our own words because we'll just say something and later on somebody will actually catch it and come back and say, remember when you said that? I'm like, no. Well, you said it. No, I didn't. Wait a minute. Let me get the video because now everybody videotapes anything you say. And sometimes we just ramble things out. And like David Gilbert said, sometimes we just, whatever's in our brain, we just blurt it out.
Yeah.
And without
David's a friend,
realizing.
by the way. Thank you for being here, David.
Thank you for being here, David. But if you consider that we have to connect to ourselves so that when we speak, it makes sense even later on, right? So it's important that we take a breath to absorb. And also the most important thing I think about communication is listening. Dr. Andrea said it perfectly when somebody said earlier that it was rough, it was tough, it was hard, whatever it is. And she made them evaluate that one word. And all of a sudden, they're like, wait a minute, maybe it wasn't that hard. Maybe it was easier than I thought. But it's the context that we put into the words or the message that we're really trying to get out there. And Aurora, you talked about that we may say something, but not everybody gets that message, right?
I would add to what you're saying. It's the consciousness we put into the message, which you were just pointing out, Sifu. Like so often people are talking, but there's no there. They're actually disconnected from what they're saying. And that can easily happen if you're tired or if you've practiced too much and you're just on autopilot. I've been on TV sometimes and I'm like saying the same story I've said multiple times and I'll notice my brain going off. I'm like, okay, come back, got to be in the story. It doesn't matter so much that I say the precisely perfect words. It matters that I'm connected. So Jordan Peterson is an excellent example of this, and Trump is the opposite extreme. So Jordan Peterson takes a moment and he does his best to speak the truth in response to whatever question he's been given. And he checks in with himself. Is it true? He's like a brilliant communicator. I'm a big fan of the way he articulates so precisely. I admire it. And then other people, I guess I don't need to specifically call out any particular politician, like you can just feel they're not there. There's no there. So even when we are still honing our message, you can be present and that will make a big difference. I want to give people a really quick hack that they can practice. It's in the book, Turn Words into Wealth. There's a bunch of communication recipes in the book, Turn Words into Wealth, but there's one I can give you really quickly, which is a myth bust. Andrea would know this from getting people on the red carpet or on stages. If you have quick sound bites, it's very catchy. So a myth would be the voice doesn't matter. And the fact would be your voice does matter. And then you would back it up. The myth might be business prowess is all about the KPIs. No, business prowess is about mastering communication and influence. So for all the listeners and watchers, can you create those short, snappy opposites that will really engage attention, sort of wake people up, wake you up too. And you want to have a myth that people commonly say. And Andrea was catching somebody, and when she said, oh, it's so hard, like that person was buying into the myth, and you called her out on it and helped her see, well, maybe it wasn't that hard.
So Sifu and I are both trained in some different ways of communication and using the modalities of bank, which is Sherry Tree is a friend of ours who has created this, founded this really great way of understanding communication and how people, or why people buy into things. And so Sifu and I have a lot of fun with that, because once you understand this particular person too, and how they think and how they react to things, then it becomes even easier, because you know that, like, if someone's a blueprint, they're very much a rule follower, and these things have to have these certain guidelines, and they have to be packed in a certain way, where your action people, can be dramatic and flaring. And when you mentioned Trump, I had pulled his last presidential speech and Biden's last presidential speech. And Biden's was very much blueprint and knowledge. So it was about rules and information and information and information. And Trump's was only action. So, so it's interesting. So people who are action takers, who are into the flair, into dramatic, who like flash and money and power and loud and controversial, love that, love watching and love listening. And then people who want to know more and want to know what the rules or what are the boundaries for things. So it's these two different opposites of that. What I found really funny in all of this in politics is like, what happened to the nurturing?
Yeah.
It's gone.
In the heart. So no heart. Really funny. So Sifu and I both have incorporated this whole idea of all this training into what we do to help our clients master that too, because so they might have the same message, but they might tweak a word or tweak the sound of the word in order to reach a different person who's listening. So if we're with a whole bunch of people who are like, clerks who are, or maybe CPAs, they're going to be about boundaries and what are the numbers and everything has to be exact. That you don't want a creative in your drawing.
Spock.
Well, like Andrea said, who are you speaking to? So if you're speaking to a bunch of accountants, you would modify. Yeah, I liked that quiz that you had me do, and presumably Jodi as well. I'm an ANKB. So that was interesting. I think I'm more similar to Andrea than Sifu, which makes a nice team, right? We want to have people with different approaches. Well, even when I'm writing fantasy, I assign personality traits. I use DISC or Gallup Strength Finder to assign personality traits, so they speak differently. And some of them are very gabby, and some of them are more reserved. Some of them always talk about information. Some of them always talk about relationships. So it's useful thinking about your audience, but also thinking, if you're writing, who is this story for?
I love the fact, the character stuff.
In knowing their code and knowing how you show up in the world. Sifu's Crack Your Code is down here. So people can go to his bit.ly at Sifu Code to get that information, and you can find out about yourself. And it's really fun too. By the way, the third one is what you do when you're under stress. So Aurora, yours was knowledge. So that probably means, and stress can be positive or negative.
Yeah, it's true.
So even like fun things, you're like, oh yeah, we got to, and you're like, oh, I got to do this or whatever. Then all of a sudden you start asking a bunch of questions.
Yeah, that would be me. But what's interesting to know as a marketing person or somebody who's delivering persuasive messages, as Jodi does, is people buy with emotion, not with information. So if you're speaking to a bunch of analysts and you're getting more and more data, they're less and less likely to buy. You need to have a big picture, a mission, a vision, something that people can align with, even if you're speaking with analysts or engineers. Otherwise, it just You're just going to give a lot of information, but they're not going to buy.
It'll be fun for you, Aurora. I'll follow up with you so you can see some of the things, because Sifu, like what Aurora's saying, and so there's validity to what you're saying. And we've also learned if you don't fulfill those things, then they won't even go there with the emotion. So you have to fulfill some. Otherwise, they're going to be like, well, you gave me nothing, so I ain't even going to give you any emotion.
Exactly.
Yeah. So it's fun to see, how people show up in the world. I love it. It's hysterical. Jodi, what have you found with yourself with people in buying into you and what you do? What is it that they resonate towards you the most? What is that hook that you seem to have?
Oh, well, I mean, like I said, I have the podcast where I talk about the power of sound. So a lot of what I discuss is how it influences our buying decisions in our daily lives. That's kind of the point of all of this. So yeah, I did find that emotion is how people buy, and that sound is the quickest way to our hearts. So, we, like you were saying, Aurora, we do not buy based on logic. We just don't. It's not what makes our decision. So yeah, I'm all about reaching people with the emotion, and sound is how I do that on my end. There are lots of other ways for people to do that, but that's how I do it.
Well, I love that you talked about people like you who like hope. And so I'm going to share my nonprofit here. So we have the Keep Smiling movement. So we talk about the mind-body connection and how, like, your mind, if you're thinking positively, you tend to smile more, which allows you to then let down more neurotransmitters and give yourself a dose, dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, endorphins, so that you have a sense of hope. And that's, like, hold on, peace exists, or maybe hold on, pain, will elude, it depends on where you're at, and I like to see positivity exude is what I like. Hold on, positivity exudes is kind of how more I run. But I love that idea that you, and when you mentioned bows, I giggled because if you would have asked me, well, who do you think my clients would be? I was going to say, Jodi sounds like somebody who would speak for bows. So when you said that, I was like, I'm telepathic. No.
Or a microphone manufacturer, this kind of thing, right? Yeah, sure.
Yeah,
There's
but
lots of things. Yeah.
you have such an easy, beautiful sound,
Thank you.
and and it's yeah, I can see a lot of different ways that your voice could be used in so many different fields to really round out that quality. So it's beautiful.
It's talking about healthcare, and congratulations on that organization. I think that's fantastic. I think one of the one of the mistakes I think that early voice actors do when they work in healthcare is that they think that it's all doom and gloom. Because you're talking about heavy subjects, right? You're talking about people dealing with cancer, or dealing with, a loved one going through a difficult time health-wise, or, there's all sorts of interesting, hard, difficult things that people deal with. But it's not that they want to focus on. It's the end result, which is the hope. So that's how you want to have a more positive outlook. Feeling better, making your own body work on your behalf means having a better outlook. And so you want the advertising and the corporate narration and whatever else is associated with that healthcare environment to have a hopeful message, as opposed to one that's, meeting them where they are in that moment, because that moment is difficult.
So Sifu, I'm giggling because you and I know something that Jodi and Aurora don't know, and that is, for me, I recently came out publicly and told people 4 weeks ago I was diagnosed with colorectal cancer, and then have possible mass in the uterus and so forth. So I'm still waiting on the biopsy back from that. And I've had 3 surgeries in the last month, and then another one in the future. And I'm like super positive about it. And I've had so many people reach out, and I was in town the other day at a banquet party, and I don't get a lot out and about in my own hometown a lot because I'm either traveling or at home. And I had people coming up to me who were like, "Oh my gosh, your positivity." And, and it's, and I guess I I do respond differently with it. I'm like not mad, I'm not sad. I have no doom and gloom attached to mine at all. People say, "Oh, I'm sorry," and I say, "Oh, I'm not. I actually think it's an inconvenience, but it was certainly a really good shaker upper to help push me to get some things done that I hadn't been taking care of." And I just see it as a positive, and it's weird for people because it's different than what they expect it to be. So I love that you're talking about making health a positive thing. I don't think it has to be you're dying. Because I think you'll believe whatever you hear.
Dr. Andrea, I got to tell you, you exemplify beauty because you bring it forth, and you talk about you're going through this hard time, but you're not calling it hard. You're calling, maybe it's a challenge, maybe it's a wake-up call, but your positivity is showing in your face. Because if you went the other way, what most people get news or even have to go 3 surgeries in a month, they're down, their face is down, so their chemistry is down. It actually helps the illness. It helps the negativity to put you down, and you start feeling down. So it's hard to move. But when you bring the beauty that you do, wow, it shows. It shows in your face, and your smile, in your eyes. And that is something that anybody listening right now should understand, that just because you have bad news doesn't have to stay bad. It does not. It's the messages that we continually say to ourselves. So words matter.
Mm-hmm.
You matter. This is why I love communication, because you, my friend, are an exceptional communicator, especially with yourself.
Thank you. And I want to let people know, I don't use the words bad news. Um, it was shocking news. It was and shock doesn't mean bad either. Like, oh, surprising news and unexpected news, because let's not make it bad. Let's make it a good thing. And even with it's actually not hard. It's just different. So
you really radiate positivity. I was going to say this before I knew that you had been diagnosed with cancer. And I think it's so important that you share. So thank you for sharing, because by sharing that and by radiating positivity and by giving an example of how to use words to serve your health and happiness instead of diminish it, you are a shining example of what others can do. So
yeah,
brilliant, Andrea.
Definitely different. So Jodi, thank you for having really good positive health messages for people. I like it.
You're welcome. I'm glad to help.
I got to tell you, this has been an exceptional show, and thank you everybody for being here. It seems like it flew, and I think we need you back on. So
it did flow. Well, I want to give a gift to the listeners. If they go to turnwordsintowealth.com, they will get a free Thought Leader Launch Starter Library. So that's my gift to the listeners, turnwordsintowealth.com. And the book, Turn Words into Wealth, is available on Amazon.
Love it. Love it. Thank you. This was not only informational, but entertaining. And Jodi talked about the fact that you only do messages that are 5 minutes or less, because it's draining, right? When you have to do something for someone else and it's not your words necessarily.
It's a lot.
And Dr. Andrea is an actress, so she knows what that's about.
Yeah. There's a lot involved in it. And also, I mean, think about it from the voice actor's point of view. I'm reading a script from a piece of paper or a PDF or whatever, and I have to sound like I'm not in a booth with headphones on and a microphone in front of my face. Like, that's a lot of acting too. So there's a lot of mindset and theater of the mind that goes on. I'm sure Andrea is well familiar with all of that. But yeah, there's a lot that goes into it. So yeah, some people love the really long form stuff, and all the power to them. I will stick with my sprinting. Thank you.
Voice acting is super fun. I did a commercial years ago, and they wanted me to do the like Valley Girl sound,
Oh, yeah.
and I went in, even though it was only in my voice. I went in with my hair in a side ponytail like this, and a piece of gum. And the guy goes, "You know, you're not on camera," and I'm like, "Yeah, method actor."
Yeah, and the physicality gets you there. Definitely it does. You were doing great work there. Yeah.
It got my brain in there because, yeah, you had to
Yep.
leave the fact that there's like 20 other people buzzing around me and really distracting, and
Yeah.
me chopping on my gum, holding it on my finger, and my side ponytail worked. By the way,
great.
that was in the 1980s or something, and I remember I was so excited because I made $75, and the only thing I had to say was, "Oh, we have online banking," and we did it in 2 takes.
Wow.
Nice, nice.
Okay.
But that was a big deal, a long time ago. So,
Well
and voice
done.
acting can be a very, very beneficial career. I don't think people realize, Jodi, how well they can do with your profession and the skill
Yeah.
set that you have.
It takes a while to get to
Mm.
a place where you're getting regular clients and it is a day-to-day full-time job. But yeah, it is totally possible.
Yeah, fun.
Love it.
Mhm.
Love it.
And Aurora,
Well,
I want to
everybody.
follow up with you because I want to know more about your magic mystery of the multiverse, which we'll have to have you on another time.
We got 2 books in that fantasy series.
Oh, love it. Love it. Yes, definitely. Both of you, we would love to have you back. I think
Sure.
this is a very engaging conversation and it should not end now. But
Thanks for
the
having
show
me.
will end, right?
I'm game whenever you are.
Awesome.
Perfect. Well, you have the link. Just book yourselves in and let's do it. Thank you again for being here.
Thank you for
And
having
Dr.
us.
Andrea, my prayers always go to you. You know that.
Thank you so much.
All right, everybody, have an exceptional rest of your Friday.
You too.
Bye.
And if you have time, join us at 1 o'clock. We have Heroes Rising. And then at 2:30, we have a masterclass.
Yes.
Take care, everybody. We'll see you again next week.
For
Bye-bye.
sure.
Bye.